Alhamdulillahi wa kafa wassalatu wassalamu ala ibadihi alladhina astafa khususan ala afdalihim wa khatamin nabiyyin Muhammadin al-Amin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa ba'd. We begin with Allah's blessed name. We praise Him and we glorify Him as He ought to be praised and glorified. And we pray for peace and for blessings on all His noble messengers, on our father Adam, and our father Abraham, and on Moses, and on Jesus, and on His mother, the Blessed Virgin Mary, and on the last of them all, the Blessed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Brother Chairman, Dr. Mira, Sister Nick Mahani Muhammad, Haji Aman Tahir, brothers and sisters, Wassalamu'alaikum Warohmatullahi Wabarokaatuh. Before we begin, let me take the opportunity to make a brief announcement, lest I forget. Someone who has devoted something like 18 years of his life to the work of restoring silver as money, and who has achieved a considerable progress in convincing his people in Mexico that this should be done, who's made a name for himself. Hugo Salinas Price wrote to me about a month ago, and we have extended an invitation to him to come to Malaysia. He has accepted our invitation, and sometime in the next few months, inshallah, he's going to address a gathering here in Malaysia on the subject of restoring silver. Basically silver as money, because that's where the big problem is, silver, not so much gold. And we thank you, Mr. Price, if you hear this lecture, for accepting our kind invitation. He has a lot of experience on what are the problems involved in restoring silver as money. We want to begin by pointing out, if we may, that the economic collapse which is already with us, but the more spectacular collapse which is around the corner, the economic meltdown, in our view, is not taking place in a vacuum, but rather that there is a larger picture connected to a political, a military, and an eschatological agenda being pursued by those who wish to rule the whole world. 15-20 years ago, when we were speaking about this, we were looking as though we had come from the moon. Nobody laughs at it anymore now. a people who want to rule the world, and to do so on behalf of the Euro-Jewish state, the Euro-Jewish state of Israel. It was in the 1930s or 40s that Arnold Toynbee, the famous British historian, published his famous book entitled Civilization on Trial. You might want to read that book. Civilization on Trial. And in that book, it is absolutely astonishing that that British historian, who was an ardent Christian incidentally, was able to penetrate the reality of modern Western civilization, of which he was a part, to put into that book in black and white that the Western agenda is to take control of the entire world, the land, the sea, the air. These are his actual words. Never before in human history did any people ever pursue such an incredible agenda, which is now unfolding before our bewildered eyes. It behoves those who recognize their rational capacity as a gift from Allah to use that intellect, that capacity to reason, to seek to understand why is this happening. It is foolishness really that we should establish a jama'ah. They call it Jamaat. And our conception of religion, to which the British Parliament is very pleased to agree, and so to the American Congress and the whole of Israel, that this conception of religion, of this Jamaat, is that all that we need to do is to perform our 5 daily prayers and to dress in accordance with the Sunnah. Nothing wrong with that. And to have our miswak, masha'Allah, that's good. The miswak, you know, the one that keeps the polish, the enamel on the teeth intact, it's not scraped. So when you smile, it's like the stars glittering above. And then when you use the toothbrush, you've seen a toothbrush, haven't you? And the brittle of the toothbrush scratches the enamel of the teeth. And then when you smile, nobody is impressed. So the miswak, mashallah. Our conception of religion is to go to the masjid and perform our duties and go back home. And our conception of religion is to go to all the Muslims around the world in something called gasht, and call them to the masjid and call them to salat and fasting and so on. But we are not concerned with this nonsense that Imran Hosein is talking about. We are a people who do not have a rational faculty. We don't seek to understand the reality of the world today. Tabligh Jamaat, Jama'atul Tabligh. Well, I have a message for them today. These people who seek to take my people into this wonderland of sleep and slumber. Allah speaks in the Quran about you. This is the first time I'm speaking so harshly, but the time has come to speak. If we are to show respect for our own rational faculty, whether we be Muslim or Hindu or Christian or Jew or Buddhist. And we must seek to understand what's happening in the world. Allah speaks in the Quran, and doubtless it's there in the Bible as well, about a people who have eyes and yet do not see. That's you, Tabligh Jamaat. They have ears and yet do not hear. That's you, Tabligh Jamaat. They have hearts and yet do not understand. That's you, Tabligh Jamaat. And these harsh words are spoken today not to vilify you, but to wake you up from your sleep. They're not spoken with hostility, they're spoken with compassion. Allah speaks of these people who have eyes and yet do not see, who have ears and yet do not hear, who have hearts and yet do not understand. Ulaika kal-an'am, they're just like cattle. Bal hum adall, rather they're worse than cattle. They're more misguided than cattle. Ulaika humul ghafilun, these are the ones who are heedless of the signs of Allah, the one God, mysteriously unfolding in the world. If you have truth, then truth must explain what's happening in the world today. And if it cannot, then go search for truth, because you don't have the truth. The reality is that they want to rule the world. They have NATO as their military arm. And if you supported NATO in Libya, then you're cattle. And if you're supporting NATO in Syria, then you're worse than cattle. You can't understand. That's their military arm. We do not say that you do not have the right to seek liberation from oppression. Of course you have the right to do that. But you do not have the right to enter into an alliance with NATO, the military arm of world Zionism. When you do that, according to the Quran, you've lost your Islam. I don't have the time to repeat that verse of the Quran for you, but it's there in many of my previous lectures. There is a political and military agenda being pursued, of which the economic collapse is linked. And that political and military agenda of a pig-headed obsession to rule the whole world is linked to the state of Israel. That they want to hand over to Israel the rule over the world. And it would be helpful, it would be beneficial if we can either spectacularly decrease the population of the world, particularly the Arabs, perhaps by biological warfare, or we can enslave them through an economic meltdown and a monetary meltdown. That Israel wants to rule the world should now be clear. But why does Israel want to rule the world? Prophet Muhammad ﷺ gave us the eschatology. Eschatology is a big word, but every Malay knows about ilmu akhirul zaman. Even the child knows about ilmu akhirul zaman, or the end time, the study of the end time. Why does Israel want to rule the world? Islamic eschatology gives the answer. We know that we are living in the end time because there are signs by which we can recognize the end time. The first one, the easiest one, even if you have bad eyesight, you could still see it, is that in the end time, people who have the intellectual acumen of naked, barefooted shepherds would be competing with each other. I understand Jeddah is the latest claimant now. Jeddah, taking over from Dubai, as Dubai took over from KL, KL took over from Seoul, and Seoul took over from Manhattan, or whatever it was, competing with each other in the construction of tall buildings, tall buildings. Here is a sign of the end time given by a man who lived in the desert, who never traveled out of the desert 1400 years ago, when they didn't have any internet, they didn't have any cell phones. He never went to a university, no, didn't have a university degree, never even went to school, no. You visit him at his home, there is no book in his home, no pen in his home. He couldn't read, no. He couldn't write, no. And that man from 1400 years ago could say a time will come when you're going to have this spectacular event of people competing with each other in the construction of tall buildings, starting of course with Manhattan skyscrapers. You know you're living in the end times. All of us except Tabligh Jamaat, with their head in the sand like ostriches, and telling me and telling you, this is Islam. No, you can't hoodwink us anymore, Tabligh Jamaat. You have to be exposed for what you are. Someone who is described in the Quran as worse than cattle. You have eyes and yet cannot see. You have ears and yet cannot hear. You have hearts and yet do not understand. And we are inviting you, not with hostility, we are inviting you with compassion to come and use the intellect and the rational faculty that Allah gave to you. Why does Israel want to rule the world? The answer was given 1400 years ago, that a man would rule over Israel. A young man, powerfully built, curly hair, and he would be a Jew. And ruling over Israel, he'll rule over the world. Or rather, he would attempt to rule over the world. Because I don't think that Russia will bend its knee to Israel. And I don't think that China will bend her knee to Israel. He will rule the world from Jerusalem and declare, I am the Messiah, Al-Masih, the Messiah. But he would not be the Messiah. For as every Christian knows and every Muslim knows, the Messiah is the son of the Virgin Mary. There was a man in India who declared that he is the Messiah. And there are many people who are less than liberally endowed with intelligence, who've accepted his claim. They call themselves Ahmadis, and they accept that he is the Messiah. A man named Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. How come you don't even have 5 ringgits worth of intelligence? The Messiah is the son of Mary, and Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is the son of a Punjabi woman. The Messiah, he will declare, has come, I am the Messiah. But he won't be the Messiah. No, said Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He would be the false Messiah. He would be Dajjal. He would be the Antichrist. This is the Islamic eschatological explanation of the economic collapse and the economic meltdown that is already taking place but will be accelerated in a short time from now. I was here in Malaysia 4 years ago, 5 years ago, in 2007. And at that time, we were already seeing a monetary meltdown taking place. And of course, a monetary meltdown must have an impact on an economic meltdown. They are linked together. You could buy a dinar, a gold coin of 4.25 grams of gold, 5 years ago here in Malaysia for 90 ringgits. Was it 90?
300 in 2006, 324.
324 in 2006. And what is it now? 825. But the Malaysian economy is one of the better economies in the world today. Malaysia has been presented to the world as a success story. Well, how come your money is melting down? What is it that explains your monetary meltdown? The answer is that it is not something inside the country which is causing the money to fall in value so spectacularly. Forces outside of Malaysia, forces outside of the Muslim world are attacking you, and attacking you with money. The US dollar in Bretton Woods was anointed by the Zionists as the new international currency. Prior to that, it was the sterling pound. The US dollar was valued 20 US for 1 ounce of gold. Yes. And then from 20, it went to 35. For reasons explained in my book, the prohibition of riba in the Quran and Sunnah, which is on my website, is also outside. Something that the US government did in 1933, I believe. And I don't have the time to explain it to you now. When you look at what the US government did in 1933, you would see the fraudulent nature of the money. And from 20 it went to 35. And then after Richard Nixon said to the world in 1971, we gave our word, but we don't have to keep it. No. In the Quran it's different. In Islam it's different. Pacta sunt servanda. When you give your word, you must keep your word. Every Christian can understand that. Every Hindu, every Jew, every Buddhist, every Confucian, every Taoist. When you give your word, you must keep exactly was. And so he tore up Bretton Woods in September 1971. And from 35 it then went to 40. And in 1973, 2 years later, when the war took place, it fell by 400% to 160, because there was an embargo on oil imposed by the Arabs. You had lines 1 mile and 2 miles long to get gasoline in the United States. Why should oil at that time, which was imported into the United States, I think only 4% they imported, all the rest was domestic. And oil is only one part of the economy in the United States. What explanation is there that a war and an embargo on Arab oil, only Arab oil, should cause your money to fall in value by 400%? The answer is that this is not to be explained by reasons in the domestic economy. No. There are forces that work outside which explain why the money is falling in value. In fact, we are now located at an extraordinary moment in history, somewhat similar to 1914, but far more important than 1914. 1914, they calculated that they were ready to bring about great change in the world. And so they engineered Sarajevo, the assassination of the Grand Duke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo in the summer of 1914. And they closed down the Kimberley diamond mines in Kimberley in South Africa in 1914, because Rothschilds had already amassed enough money to fund every single side of a world war. And as a result of 1914, the war which commenced, the world was changed. But we are now located today at a far more momentous moment in history. And it's such a pity that Tabligh Jamaat has no inkling about it and doesn't seem to be at all interested, even interested in going to the Quran and going to the Hadith to understand this momentous event. Every single part of the world I have gone to, only one people have closed the doors of the masjid to me, not allowing me to teach. It's Tabligh Jamaat. Nowhere in the world am I allowed to teach and to lecture. And yet I am teaching you that which you do not know. Shame on you! Shame on you for closing the doors of the masjid to those who teach this subject that you do not teach and you will never teach. What's wrong with you? Israel wants to attack Iran. It can happen any day now. United States of America is resigned. You cannot stop Israel. United States knows that once Israel attacks Iran, Iran is going to attack United States troops in Iraq. United States knows that once Iran attacks the United States in Iraq, the United States will not have a single friend in Iraq. Not one. And so the United States will not be able to fight a successful war against Iran in Iraq. And that's why, brothers and sisters and friends, that's why they pulled out of Iraq so suddenly like a thief in the dark. And to cover their shame, they're saying, we're sending troops to Israel. We're sending troops here and there. That's dust in your eyes. They have pulled out of Iraq because they know they cannot fight Iran in Iraq. That's why. As soon as Israel attacks Iran, and Israel knows it, and the United States knows it, and the Federal Reserve knows it, as soon as, and Wall Street knows it, as soon as that attack takes place, within hours, is it so difficult to understand what's going to happen to the price of oil? Is it so difficult to understand what's going to happen to the price of gold? This is a more momentous event in history than 1933. Oh yes, and then 1971. As the price of oil and the price of gold skyrocket, it's actually the dollar going down into the garbage bin. And because the dollar is linked to every other currency in the world today, it is the international currency. Haji Aman is so correct. Prices around the world are going to escalate. And I am supposed to speak today, how should we respond? The rich can survive, but what about the poor? What about the masses who can no longer afford to buy food, who cannot afford to pay electricity bills, who cannot afford, as they even now in Yemen cannot afford to even buy the gas cylinder with which to cook their food? How are you going to survive? Not only that, but isn't it strange that for the first time in history, an economic system has drawn the villages out to the city, attracted the villagers out into the city, forced the villagers out of economic necessity to the city. And so you now have, for the first time in human history, something called mega cities. We used to think that 1 million people in a city, my gosh, that's a lot of people. But wake up. Lots of cities in the world today have 10 million. And some have 15 and some have 20 million people in a city. And when wars take place, because the attack on Iran is not meant to knock out Iran. Not at all. The attack on Iran is meant to provoke a series of wars which are going to last for some time. Cities are going to be attacked. How? Supply of food, the food chain, the supply chain, water. How are you going to survive in the city when you cannot get food? You have the money to buy the food, but the food is not there. Because the food is delivered from outside of the city. Food is not grown in the cities. And the water comes to you from outside. And if the enemy is successful in disrupting the water means through which water is conveyed, the electricity supply and the supply of food, and people are starving, would you have riots? Would it not be dog eat dog? So even if you have some food, it'd probably be snatched from you before you could reach home. How do we respond to what is about to take place? Before we answer that, let us turn to the Quran for what is known as fasad. What is about to take place can be described as fasad. What is already taking place is fasad. Fasad is not just that which corrupts, brings about disorder, brings about disintegration. Fasad is that also which destroys. And in the Quran, Allah has prescribed punishment for many different criminal acts. But the greatest punishment of all is for fasad. There's a graded punishment. At the lower level is banishment. But at the highest level is cut off the hand and the feet from opposite sides and then crucify. Cut off the hands and feet from opposite sides and then crucify. Fasad. We not only have economic fasad in the world today, and terrorism is fasad. We have monetary terrorism. We have political terrorism. If I had the time, I'd love to explain to you the sexual terrorism. There is military terrorism in the world today, military fasad. There is religious terrorism in the world today, religious fasad. And the major proponents are those who want to rule the world. They do it with awesome deception. They are the terrorists. But they use the media to paint us as the terrorists. What is it that explains this universal fasad in the world today? Universal oppression, universal corruption of everything. The Quran says that it explains all things. Tabligh Jamaat, are you listening? The Quran says that it explains all things. Does it not? It says in Surah Al-Nahl, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ونزلنا عليك الكتاب تبيانا لكل شيء وهدى ورحمة وبشرى للمسلمين, that the Quran was sent down to explain all things. And so I ask you, as I asked you, Dr. Yusuf al-Qaradawi, but perhaps he has a hearing problem, he cannot hear me. I ask you, where in the Quran do we have that which explains the universal fasad in the world today? You cannot continue hiding behind trees forever. We demand an answer. Our answer is there. Inna ya'juja wa ma'juja mufsiduna fil ard. There's only one possible explanation for universal fasad, and that is Gog and Magog. Will you laugh at me? Imran Hosein is misguided. At this moment there is no anger in my heart, only pain and sorrow. But let me tell you, when you laugh at me, which of course you should not be doing, let me tell you that he who laughs last laughs best. How do we respond? I want to offer to you a micro response, and then even more importantly, a macro response. Survival depends on retreat from the mega cities, which we didn't have yesterday, and we don't need today. Retreat from the mega cities and ensure security of food and of water. The two things you cannot live without. What's wrong with that? What is wrong with an Islamic scholar asking you to ensure food security and water security? If you can do it in downtown Karachi, well, go ahead. But I am seeing it tomorrow, which is coming, when there are going to be riots in Karachi because you can't get food into the city and you can't get water. So before that day comes, we say retreat to the countryside. Secondly, we say produce your own food. I spoke about sexual terrorism. Who fights wars? Allah didn't create women to fight wars. No. Allah created men to fight wars. I don't know whether Washington has a problem with that. Allah created the male to fight wars. And He gave to the male the obligation to protect and to guard women. And so it is men who fight wars. But when you inject the cows with hormone injections, and the milk that your baby drinks now has the hormone injections, and the meat that your baby eats has hormone injections in it, and the food that you eat is genetically modified, is it possible one day that men will be like women? Is that possible? Oh yes, the Prophet said, the man who 1400 years ago said, I am a prophet of God like unto Moses and Abraham. He said the time will come when women will dress like men. You will see her in a jacket, in the trousers, and a tie. I went to Indonesia last month. We were staying in a hotel. And the rule of the hotel that all the women who were working in the hotel had to be dressed with trousers and jacket and a tie. A tie. Yeah. I don't know how he knew it. That women would dress like men. So you have working clothes, which is masculine, not party clothes, working clothes. But he said that men would dress like women. Why would a man dress like a woman? Of course, you know, the first thing he'll have to do is to shave off his beard. Excuse me. The first thing he'll have to do is to shave off his beard. Eventually, he now dresses like a woman. Why? Because he's acquiring a feminine personality. Are you going to send these children to some correction facility? That's what the Malaysian government is doing. Because they're too feminine now. These teenage boys are too feminine in behavior. Some correctional facility? Or are you going to tighten your belts, stand up to the Zionists, and look at the subject eschatologically? That this is a planned demolition of manhood. This is sexual terrorism. So it's not enough to ensure your own food security. You got to ensure what is the food you're eating. If tomorrow you want men to fight against oppression, that manhood, that virility, that courage comes partly from food. And so we say, do not eat their food, produce your own food. In the micro communities in the remote countryside, we also have a means of escaping the monetary predicament. Because once the US dollar collapses, that's almost certain that the new money that's coming, it's already here in fact, is electronic money, digital money. And when you're hooked into that, it's the equivalent of a financial Guantanamo. If you're comfortable with that, fine. But if you want to remain faithful to Allah and His Messenger, and even have 5 ringgits worth of respect for your own rational faculty, you'd want to return to true money, to real money. And so you want to return to the dirham and to the dinar. And that's why we're really looking forward to Hugo Salina's prize when he comes, inshallah, from Mexico in a few months from now. What is his experience? In our market, we will not permit that paper currency which is bogus, which is fraudulent, which is utterly haram, but Tabligh Jamaat is not interested in that. They have more important things to think about, like dressing in the sunnah, but in your pocket is the haram money. Yes, all of us are using it, but the difference between us and you is we are struggling for a way out of it. And you don't even want to touch this subject. Haram, you must not talk on this subject in the masjid. Time is up for you, Tabligh Jamaat. We have embarked on a wake-up call for our people that they don't remain sleeping in Tabligh Jamaat. In our micro markets, we will restore dinar and dirham. That's our answer. And if we have a shortage of dinar and dirhams in our micro market, we'll use commodities of food as money. Like, for example, rice. In that booklet in front of you, you'll see in that the last chapter, Indonesia can use rice as money. And we will not allow paper currencies to be used in our market. So we do not have to be bothered about the fluctuating value of the silver coin in relation to your bogus money. No, because they are not side by side in our market. Our market is only dinar and dirham. We also want to ensure that society which is collapsing around the world is brought back together. That the Chinese and the Malay can live together in our kampung and be so friendly with each other. No more hostility between Chinese and Malay. If you can do it, go ahead, let's see you do it. I don't think you can do it, but we can do it. That the Christian and the Muslim and the Hindu can live together as a fraternity. We can do it, because we will live with mutual respect for each other, and in our market the Muslim has no advantage over the non-Muslim. No. And in our market there are no fixed prices, no price control, no. In our market, if you plant, you reap, and if you don't plant, you don't reap. That is Islam as we know it. So in our market we will have economic democracy. And that economic democracy will allow the Chinese and the Malay and the Indian to live together, the Christian and the Hindu and the Muslim to live together as a fraternity. But we have to restore Islam in our community. And in Islam we have certain concepts like the Jama'ah and the Amir. The sheep cannot be without a shepherd. All the sheep wandering all over the shopping malls, and the wolves eating them up one by one. You see them in the tight blue jeans. But in our village we enforce the deen. This is a no-nonsense Islam here. In our village, we enforce the deen amongst our people. The Chinese will have their way of life, the Indians will have their way, the Christians, the Hindus. We're not going to interfere in your way of life. But we must come together to have certain norms of public conduct for everybody. So you're not going to be walking around with a bottle of beer on the main street. Huh? Or your daughter or your sister, your wife in hot pants? No. Not in our village. Certain norms of public conduct. The macro response is more important now. Where we do have control over territory, we have an obligation to build power to respond to them. Because we know the attack is not only economic, we have the big picture. And Allah has commanded in the Quran, وَأَعِدُّ لَكُمْ وَأَعِدُّ لَهُمْ مَسْتَطَعْتُ مِنْ قُوَّةٍ وَمِنْ رِبَاطِ الْخَيْرِ إِلَى آخِرِ الْآيَةِ. Build power. Build it to the maximum extent possible. Not so that you use power to oppress. No. تُرْهِبُونَ بِهِ عَدُوَّ اللَّهِ وَعَدُوَّكُمْ. So that your power may function as a deterrent. And if nuclear power is what will cause them to step back before they attack, then build nuclear power. Build it to the maximum extent that you can build it, that it can function as a deterrent. Pakistan has already done it. It is time for Iran, which will do it immediately Iran is attacked. Iran is going to announce it is pulling out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty as soon as it attacks. And Iran has every right to build nuclear power, nuclear weapons, because Allah has commanded in the Quran, build power to the maximum extent that you can possibly build it. But there's something else. I was interviewed a few days ago by Mark Glenn from, I think, San Francisco, and in his opening comment said to me, Imran, I believe that interview is on the YouTube, you can listen to it. Islam is the only surviving force in the world today, the last one standing up to those who would rule the world. I said, and he said, for him Christianity has fallen. I said to him, Mark, I don't agree with you, and the Quran does not agree with you, and the Prophet does not agree with you. No. The Quran makes a distinction between two kinds of Christians. Both are called An-Nasara. But in the first one, Allah says in the Quran, in Surah Al-Ma'idah, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, يا أيها الذين آمنوا, O you who have faith in Allah, لا تتخذوا اليهود والنصارى أولياء. Do not take the Jews and do not take the Christians as your friends and allies. Those who use the lazy man's methodology would conclude that the Quran is speaking about all Jews and all Christians. That's the lazy man's methodology. But those who use the correct methodology would soon realize that no, Allah is not speaking about all Jews and all Christians. Well, then which Jews and which Christians? بَعْدُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. Do not take such Jews and such Christians as your friends and allies, who themselves establish friendship and alliance with each other. Allah is not speaking about an individual Christian who is a friend of his Jew who is next door. He's talking about an alliance between two people. If you become friends and allies of that Judeo-Christian alliance, then Allah warns, وَمَنْ يَتَوَلَّهُ مِنْكُمْ فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ. You've lost your Islam. You've lost your Islam. You now belong to them. Too bad for those in Libya who joined with NATO. Too bad for those in Syria who are joining with NATO. Too bad for all the Arabs who are beating the drums and clapping and clapping and clapping, who support NATO. When you reach into the grave, my dear friends, you will find out you're not a Muslims. This is the Quran. Ask Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi what's his opinion on this. This is one form, one part of the Christian world with which we are not allowed to have any alliance or any friendship. This has emerged today in the Judeo-Christian Zionist alliance. These are the ones who control the US Congress. These are the ones who control the IMF and the World Bank. These are the ones who have NATO as their military arm. But then there's another part of the Christian world. The Quran points to it. In the same Surah Al-Ma'idah, where Allah speaks and says, وَلَتَجِدَنَّ أَقْرَبَهُمْ مَوَدَّةً لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّا نَصَارَى. That you will most certainly find in time to come that those who will be closest of all to you in love and friendship and affection will be those who say, we are Christians, we are Christians. If that has not as yet fully emerged at this point in time, it's coming. It's coming. Who are those Christians that the Quran is speaking of? Prophet Muhammad ﷺ answered for us, and the hadith is there, that you are going to make an alliance with Rome. Who is Rome? If you say that Rome is the Italian city of Rome, and Rome is therefore Romans, I suggest you buy a one-way ticket to Disneyland. Rome is in the Quran, not just the hadith. When Allah uses the word Rome in the Quran, is He referring to Italy? To a city in Italy? Where has your intellect gone? To Hollywood? No. Rome in the Quran is Byzantium. It is the Eastern Christian Byzantine Empire, which had its capital in Constantinople. The Eastern Christian is different from the Western. The Western has his center in Rome. He's Roman Catholic or he's Protestant. But the Eastern Christian does not even celebrate Christmas with you. He has a different Christmas. I think it's the 9th of January. 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever it is. It's not 25th of December. That's what. These Eastern Orthodox Christians are to be found in Russia, are to be found in Eastern Europe, to be found in Greece. That's Rome. And the Prophet is saying that you are going to make an alliance with Rome. And so we're saying to you today from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia that the religion of Islam is anticipating at the macro level in responding to what is happening in the world today, is anticipating a Christian-Muslim alliance that will stand up against those who are oppressing us in the world today. At the heart of Rome today is Russia. Oh yes, I know there are Zionists in Russia. Oh yes, I know there are Zionists in China. But there are Zionists in Pakistan as well. Lots of Zionists in Saudi Arabia as well. And as NATO launches its walls, to attack Iran, to attack Pakistan, where India is also going to play a major role in the attack on Pakistan, attack on Egypt. As NATO launches these wars, there is going to be considerable fervor for change in Eastern Europe and Russia. And so whatever continuing Zionist influence there may be will be overcome, and the Christian-Muslim alliance will be established. Already Iran has very firm and close relations with Russia. Already Pakistan has seen the writing in the wall, and Pakistan has applied for membership in the Russian-Chinese Pact. And Russia has supported Pakistan's application for membership. And I am confident that the Turkish people will wake up from their slumber at the moment, and that the Turkish government cannot continue to fool the Turkish Muslim people in supporting NATO in Libya and supporting NATO in Syria. No, that NATO cannot remain in Turkey forever. No. لَتَفْتَحَنَّ الْقُسْطَنْطِنِيَّةَ, said the Prophet ﷺ, means goodbye, NATO. You cannot remain in Istanbul forever. Goodbye, NATO. Perhaps it's going to be civil war in Turkey. But this alliance of Christians and Muslims is coming, and it is part of our macro response to the economic meltdown and collapse which we are already experiencing and which is about to be accelerated. This has been my micro response, this has been my macro response in a nutshell. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may give us a chance, that we will put our heads together, because mind is not the only one, to further develop this response. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين آمين.
إلهي لست للفردوس أعلى ولا أقوى على نار الجحيم. الله فهب لي توبة واغفر ذنوبي فإنك غافر الذنب العظيم. إلهي لست للفردوس أعلى ولا أقوى على نار الجحيم. الله فهب لي توبة واغفر ذنوبي فإنك غافر الذنب العظيم. Tuhanku, aku tidak layak untuk syurgamu, tetapi aku tidak pula sanggup menanggung siksa nerakamu. Dari itu kurniakanlah ampunan kepadaku, ampunkanlah dosaku. Sesungguhnya Engkaulah pengampun dosa-dosa besar. Tuhanku, aku tidak layak untuk syurgamu, tetapi aku tidak pula sanggup menanggung siksa nerakamu. Dari itu kurniakanlah ampunan kepadaku, ampunkanlah dosaku. Sesungguhnya Engkaulah pengampun dosa-dosa besar. Ilahi أهلا ولا أقوى على نار الجحيم الله فهب لي